Why do I write? Is a question I often ask myself after going through a busy period when I've burned myself out from writing and editing and doing book events and all of the things that are related to writing and publishing. It is a lot of work. It can be challenging, it can be frustrating, it can be discouraging. So, why do I write? And what it all boils down to is that I hope that someday someone will pick up one of my books and will be drawn into the story during a difficult time or a time when they just need a little extra distraction, and that one of my books may become their comfort read, because books can be such a supportive friend when you don't feel like you have any other friends in the world, which is how I felt as a kid. And I'm sure many people, I think we've all gone through that phase where we feel like everybody's against us, and we find some kind of thing that we can do to either rebel against everybody, or we find a way to hide out from everybody. And in my case, it was hiding out in a book. And I did get myself into quite a bit of trouble as a kid when I should have been doing my chores and instead would be found sitting in a corner reading, or if I stayed up past my bedtime reading. And so um, withholding reading from me was definitely one of the ways I was reprimanded as a child, because I would much rather have been lost in a book than doing anything else at that time. And I do regret that I'm not in that place anymore, even though it could be hard to function as an adult if I spent all of my time with my nose in a book. I think I've found a little bit of balance, but I do occasionally still love to lose myself in the written word, not just through the stories I'm creating, but through the books of my favorite author. And I know I've mentioned her before. Her name is Georgette Heyer. She wrote Regency romances and mysteries, and I was, and still am, much more fond of her Regency romances than I am of her mysteries, but I do enjoy a lot of her writing. And two books in particular really became important comfort reads to me, so much so that I still have copies of them in my house. And I may have also talked about this before, but I would love to be someone's favorite read. All jokes aside about the standard rich and famous contract, I really think that sharing a story with someone, giving them a little bit of escapism, and having them feel the excitement that I felt about reading my favorite author are good aspirations to have. I distinctly remember going out to buy copies of my favorite books, or even when I couldn't afford them, going to check them out from the library. I probably checked out the same books on a very regular basis. And so, one of my favorite books from high school, and one that I still continue to read to this day, is called Arabella. Now, this is a modern copy of the book. I don't have a version from when I was in high school, but it is still a very enjoyable read, even though the more modern cover, I don't feel really connects to the story as well as some of the more classic versions, but that may just be me. But let me read you the back of this. Impetuosity is Arabella's only fault. An enchanting debutante and the oldest daughter of an impoverished country parson, Arabella Tallant embarks on her first London season. Armed with beauty, virtue, and a benevolent godmother, Arabella is sure to be a success as long as her notoriously impetuous temper does not interfere. So, obviously, Arabella is the main character in this story. His arrogance proves too much for her to bear. But when Robert Beaumaris, the most eligible nonpareil of the day, accuses her of being yet another pretty female after his wealth, Arabella allows herself to be provoked into a deceitful charade that might have unexpected consequences. So, this is a book set in the Regency era. It is, as far as I'm aware, very accurate to the time period. Georgette Heyer did quite a bit of research into the Regency era. And I mean, the clothing, the carriages, the houses, the furnishings, what happened during a London season, how people would repair to the country to hunt or to hide away if they got themselves into a scrape, so to speak, or visit Bath to take the waters when they weren't feeling well. And all of those little details really helped me escape from the things that bothered me at that point in my life. And this is not to say that I was having a horrible life. This was me as an emotional child slash teenager. Actually, at this point, I was definitely a teenager. My comfort reads in elementary school were the Nancy Drew books and Hardy Boys too. But Georgette Heyer became my high school comfort read and was so much a part of my high school life that that's why I have copies of the books even today that I still read. Now, Arabella is one of my two favorite books. The second, and this is fascinating because I got this copy from our local library in the town where I went to high school. It was a discard because I will show you for obvious reasons. The book is absolutely falling apart. The last page is missing. The entire cover has come off. And it still has the pocket for the library card in the back and the Stanislaus County Library stamp. But at this point, obviously, they could not check out this book because it was falling apart. So I picked it up as a library discard. And this book, even though it is falling apart, is one of my prized possessions. So this is the cover, or one of the covers that I remember from my high school years, because I think this version would have come out in, oh my gosh, let me see. Probably the 1970s, I'm guessing. See, the original printing was in 1946. Yes, this book was 1977. So this would have been a 1970s era cover, and you can tell that it's much different from the more modern cover for Arabella, which is similar to a lot of the books that you can see on the shelves now. And I think I picked this up just a couple of years ago. So even though I love reading Arabella, this cover doesn't really connect with me in the way that this cover of Friday's Child does. Friday's Child, oh, you see it's falling apart. The dashing young Lord Sheringham, known to other young bloods as Sherry, was in a towering rage. He had to marry in order to come into his fortune and swore to take the first woman he saw. Now, of course, the wording, little problematic there. She chanced to be Hero Wantage, an ill-treated and a neglected orphan in a neighboring household. Her tearful story reminded him of his intentions, and he bundled her off to London, where Hero, soon to be nicknamed Kitten, proved to be a quick and almost too apt pupil in the strange and sophisticated ways of society. So both of these, and of course many Regency romances, are based on the idea that the young woman needs to marry. Usually she needs to marry someone with money. In Arabella's case, it's because she's one of the oldest children in a family of 8, I think. And with her father being a parson, they don't have a lot of money. So in order for her siblings to have any chance in life, they need her to marry someone wealthy who can be their family benefactor. In Friday's Child, Hero is an orphan. Obviously, since she has no parents and no money, she is at the uh, she's at the mercy of the relatives who have taken her in, and they have decided they want to send her off to be a governess because she tends to get herself into a lot of what she calls scrapes. So Hero and Arabella are two very different main characters, but they both end up in similar places where they have caused some challenges to themselves by, in Arabella's case, being untruthful because she pretends that she's a wealthy heiress to prove to Robert Beaumaris that she is not after his fortune. And Hero agrees to marry Sherry because she really does love him in a childish way in the beginning, but he doesn't understand, and he doesn't realize until later on in the story how she feels about him. And he doesn't understand until later how he truly feels about her. So both of these books are comedies of comedies of errors that are set in the Regency era with a lot of very accurate historic detail as to the clothing and the housing and the transportation and all of those good things. So they were great escapism for me as a teenager. And I was reminded of just how much I love these books when JT and I drove through Portland, Oregon a couple years ago on our way to Canada. And we'd been wanting to make a pilgrimage to Powell's Books, the main branch in downtown Portland, for quite some time. And I was in the rare book room looking around, and I saw this. This is the exact binding that was in my high school library. This would have been what I saw the first time I picked this book off my high school library shelf. And the feelings that rushed back to me when I saw this copy made me pay way too much for it. But that's okay because I love this book. I love this copy, and this is one of my prized possessions now. So why do I write? I write because I would love to inspire those feelings in somebody else. There's really nothing like being excited about a story or being excited about maybe a favorite musician or whatever we happen to be incredibly excited about. The newest and most exciting movie, our sports team winning something. Whatever brings us that much joy is a good thing. And for me, these books by my favorite author have brought me so much joy over the years. And it's been more than a half century at this point where I've been reading these books. So the fact that I still can feel those same feelings when I pick up a cover from high school, or this is obviously not the same book from my high school. It was from another library. This was actually from the Cape Breton Regional Library. But inspiring those feelings in someone, that's why I write. And I don't know if anybody will ever become that attached to my books. I know that people's attentions are drawn in so many different directions now that I wonder whether it's even possible to inspire those kinds of feelings anymore. And like I said, finding that copy at Powell's Books and paying too much for it, I thought was more than worthwhile just because it brought me back to those feelings. And it reminded me of feeling the same thing over other things as a kid. Like when I went and bought my favorite Sean Cassidy 45, the most recent one that came out, or if I actually got a full album, that was a huge bit of excitement. And those feelings that we have as teenagers going into young adulthood, those feelings are so strong that at our age, and I'm talking about our as in my generation getting older, we don't often have those kinds of excited feelings about things anymore, or at least I don't. That doesn't mean I don't get excited about things, but it's a much more toned down version of that excitement. So having something come back to me that strongly is really, it's a rush. And I would love to be the kind of author that maybe someday brings a rush of feelings to someone. And I have seen it happen with other authors, with musicians, with, people do still get excited about things. I mean, I have mentioned Taylor Swift multiple times because really she inspires a lot of excitement right now, especially as I record this. Toy Story 5 has come out or is coming out, and Taylor Swift has done a song for the movie, and it's been a huge thing all over. Just she's everywhere in the press, and I can see that she's inspiring those feelings of excitement in the people who follow her, the people who love her, the people who know every little detail about her, such as the fact that her favorite or her lucky number is 13. And they know so many details about her life because they love her work so much. And I really have no expectations of becoming the next Taylor Swift or the Taylor Swift of the writing world. My only hope is that I can inspire in someone somewhere the feelings that I had when I was reading my favorite author. So despite all the long days out in the sun, all the bruises from carrying all the bins of books and the pop-up and the wind and the heat and the getting overstimulated because I'm an introvert and I'm dealing with tons of people when we're trying to sell our books. Despite all of those, what could be considered downsides, but in some ways the experiences are just as fun. Despite all of the challenges, let's say, I think writing is worthwhile because I would love to be able to connect with people. And that's why I write. Obviously, I like telling stories. I think that's part of me being Irish. I'm also Portuguese, but I don't know that much about that side of myself, so I will have to learn more. But the Irish are definitely storytellers, and I grew up in a family that spent a lot of time talking about Irish things in Ireland, so I'm sure that's part of my formative story as a writer. Obviously, part of my formative story as a writer is reading people that I really enjoyed and imagining myself in their shoes as a writer. Some of my favorite characters in TV and movies have been writers. So I love Little Women and Joe March. I also loved the Waltons and John Boy and his storyline where he went to New York. I actually just rewatched that episode recently, and it reminded me just how much those stories fed into my imagination when it came to the idea of what it would be like to be a writer. Because obviously, in TV and movies, they're going to make things work out for the best in the long run. So, John Boy went to New York, and the editor reads his book and loves it and buys it, and he ends up moving to New York. And that happens to very few people in real life. Not to say that it didn't happen to the person who wrote The Waltons, Earl Hamner, who was the author that wrote Spencer's Mountain, I believe, which turned into The Waltons, the television show. So I've been inspired by writers for the majority of my life, and I didn't really even consider becoming a writer as a kid because I thought it was so far beyond anything I could ever manage to do. But as a young adult, I gave in to the idea that maybe I should give it a shot. And ever since then, my dream has been to write and publish. And I'm achieving that dream, and I'm very happy with it. My only hope now is to continue to do so for as long as possible until hopefully someday someone somewhere connects with one of my stories. And it may never happen, but the hope is always there. So I just thought I'd talk a little bit today about why I write, because obviously I've been talking a lot recently about all the challenges of writing. So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering why I continue to do it when it's so challenging. And I'm sure at some level the challenges are equally as interesting as the writing process. And obviously, I wouldn't continue doing it if I didn't want to do it, because it is expensive, it is exhausting, and it's discouraging. So that's why I write. I write to make connections with readers in the hope that someday I may make one person's day just a little bit better. If I happen to get the standard rich and famous contract at the same time, that wouldn't hurt. But if you've come across this video, I'd be interested to know who your favorite writers are, or what things bring you joy. What things did you really gravitate to during your formative years that you look back on now and they can remind you of how you felt at that time? If you are an avid reader, who is your favorite author and what are your favorite books of theirs? I'm really curious to know, because aside from reading and writing, I love talking about books too, in case you couldn't tell by some of my videos. So that's my little ramble about why I write. And I thank you for joining me. I thank you for sticking in there if you watched this all the way through. And like I said, I really hope you will let me know who your favorite authors are, or, your favorite musicians, whatever brings you joy. And I will chat with you again tomorrow. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Take care.